Right, Vanessa and Cedar here now to talk us through all today's top headlines. Good morning to you both. Lots going on.
Yes.
Lots going on. But this story, it sparked, as it always does, huge conversations and important conversations. The headline is, firms must make allowances for menopausal women. Explain, discuss, debate as you wish.
Well, I just know that my first experience of the menopause was when I started on Radio 2. I got to work and suddenly I was boiling hot. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning because I used to do the early breakfast show, and a young male producer came in at the end of the show and he said, do you know you put your cardigan on and off 36 times? And I said, well, instead of counting, you could have fanned me with a palm frond or something or done something useful. Get me some ice, for God's sake, or something. I mean, it is a pretty overwhelming thing to have a hot flush, or many of them, while in the throes of work in a big office with lots of people looking at you, isn't it?
It is. The Equalities and Human Rights Commission have looked at this and they've basically said that if women are going to stay in the workplace, and remember, when most women get to menopause, they're firing on all cylinders. They're in top-level management. Just from a pure business perspective, why would you want to lose all this amazing talent at that stage? And the number of women who've said they've considered even walking out of the workplace altogether. And there are some really small things that companies can do. I know that when I first started going through menopause, I wasn't great in the morning, but actually I was all right later on in the evening. So I could have started later, finished later. I could have worked from home. I could have made sure that we lowered the pace on those days that it was actually more difficult to cope with. Just a level of understanding, because I think both from a woman's perspective, you know, we want to make sure that we're fully supported in the workplace at that point in our life, but also from a business perspective, just try and keep this amazing talent that you've got, who are now, you've probably got so much experience, and you're going to end up losing them because you're just not being thoughtful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, I come from a generation when my mum died, she was only 57, and you know, she'd never even mentioned the M word to me, never discussed it with me, so I don't know what was normal for her, or I didn't know what to expect. And one of the great things that you know, being so open about it now has brought people is at least some kind of understanding, so you don't have to blush in front of your boss or in front of a male colleague, or you know, pretend it's not happening. Just say, I'm having the menopause, look at it. Look, you know, I'll be all right in a couple of minutes, that's it.
Well, we are joined by a menopause specialist, Louise Newson. Louise, hiya.
Morning.
Hi, good morning.
Louise, what do you make of this news?
I think it's good in the respect that the menopause can be defined as a disability, because it does have physical and psychological consequences that can be in the long term. What really frustrates me, as many of you know, being a medical doctor, is that we have an evidence-based treatment that the minority of women are receiving. And globally, it's only about 5% of women who are menopausal receive HRT. In the UK, it's 14%. Now, personally speaking, even if I'd been allowed to change my hours or change what I was doing when I was working as a doctor and menopausal, I would have had to give up my job because my brain wasn't working or functioning. I couldn't remember things. I was really struggling. So a lot of women, it's not about a fan. It's not about changing a uniform. Talking about it is great, but if we have any other medical condition that's affecting us in the workplace, the first thing we should do is try and access evidence-based treatment. So we need to use this as another leverage to think, why are women being denied evidence-based treatment when a lot of them want it? Not everyone does, but actually we know for the majority of women, HRT is first-line evidence treatment. We've got guidelines from 2015 telling us how safe HRT is, yet women are struggling. Every day I speak to women and it's easier for them to be prescribed antidepressants than it is to be prescribed HRT. And it's not just the symptoms. We know there's an increased risk of diseases. The longer we're working in the workplace, the greater the risk of osteoporosis, heart disease, dementia, diabetes. That will affect people. But we also know there's lots of women I speak to who are taking time off work because they're going for investigations for their palpitations, for their headaches, for their joint pains, for their urinary symptoms. This is time away from work to see a specialist, whereas actually if they were given HRT early, we know the earlier people take it, the better, we won't have those symptoms. So we won't be then draining resources on the NHS, but also reducing time that we're in the workplace as well.
The headline is employers could be sued if they do not make reasonable adjustments for menopausal women. So on a very practical level, Louise, how should that change the workplace for women?
It's going to be really difficult for employers, actually. I think it's good for women that it's spoken about, but actually I feel like we're going back in time. In the 1800s, we talked about the psychological impact of the menopause and periods changing, yet we didn't know a treatment then. You know, it's not really the employer's responsibility to pick up the pieces because women are not having access to evidence-based treatment by healthcare professionals.
Women have suffered for years and years and years. Louise, why is it taking so long?
I wish I knew. We've got guidelines, we've got really safe hormones, we know the effects, and it's not just affecting older women as well. You know, younger women, I've got women who were in their teens when they were diagnosed as menopausal. So women are struggling wherever you look, and I don't really understand why it's so difficult for us to receive treatment.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you know what I really like about this as well? I think I know it's guidance to companies, but what it does increase consciousness in the workplace, particularly for men, to be a little bit more empathetic if they think maybe a colleague's going through something.
It does, and I mean, Louise won't say this because of client confidentiality, but Louise is an absolute saviour, and Louise was the person who, for me, changed the course of my menopause journey because there was all these symptoms going on, and I was struggling with trying to get the NHS to respond to that, and in the end, I just sat down with her and we went through and put a programme of HRT together, and she's absolutely right. There is still a huge gap in what the NHS can provide, the understanding within the NHS around menopause, the fact that almost every time you go back to the doctor, I'm sorry, this is not the question you asked, but I think it's really important to say that every time you go back, you're almost questioned about whether you still need it, as if somehow you're going to ask for sweeties, not some real medical response to a medical condition. So I think it's important we talk about it in the workplace, but it's important that we also talk about it in terms of healthcare. My daughter, actually, who's a doctor, said if men had menopause, we'd have fixed it by now.
Thanks, Ada.
Well, we'd be talking about it and giving out about it a lot more. That's for sure. Yeah.